Where do I go when there's no one else to turn to? Who do I talk to when no one wants to listen? Who do I lean on? Oh, oh. When there's no foundation stable, I go to the rock. I know he is able. I can go to the rock. Stable, I go to the rock. I know he is able. I can go to the rock. I can go to the rock of my salvation. I go to the stone that the builders rejected. I run to the mountain, and the mountain stands by me. When all around me is sinking sand, on Christ the solid rock. Shelter when I need a friend, I can go to the rock. On Christ this rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. On Christ this rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. On Christ this rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. On Christ this rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. I can go to the rock of my salvation. I go to the stone that the builders rejected. I run to the mountain, and the mountain stands by me. When all around me is sinking sand, on Christ the solid rock I stand. When I need a shelter, when I need a friend, I can go to the rock. Yeah, I can go to the rock.
I'm not a warrior, I'm too afraid to lose. I feel unqualified for what you're calling me to. But Lord, with your strength, I've got no excuse. 'Cause broken people are exactly who you use. So give me faith like Daniel in the lion's den. Give me hope like Moses in the wilderness. Give me a heart like David, Lord, be my defense. So I can face my giants with confidence. You took a shepherd boy and made him a king. So I'm gonna trust you and give you everything. I'll be a conqueror, 'cause you fight for me. I'll be a champion, claiming your victory. So give me faith like Daniel in the lion's den. Give me hope like Moses in the wilderness. until I see him fall. Gonna stand up, step back when you call. Jesus, Jesus, I'm gonna sing and shout and shake the walls. Won't stop until I see him fall. Gonna stand up, step back when you call. Jesus, give me faith like Daniel in the lion's den. Give me hope like Moses in the wilderness. Give me a heart like David, Lord, be my defense, so I can face my giants with confidence. Yeah! Give me faith like Daniel in the lion's den. Give me hope like Moses in the wilderness. Give me a heart like David, Lord, be my defense, so I can face my giants with confidence. I'll face my giants with confidence.
Hi friends, welcome back to Wake Up and Worship. I'm so glad you're with us this morning. If you've been with us all week, you know that we've been focusing on our bottom line from Jonah's story on Sunday, which was that God's plan for you is bigger than just you. Through you following God's plan, others might be saved. We saw that in Jonah's story, and we've been looking all week at how we can be an example to others around us, so that as we follow God's plan for our lives, as we just live everyday life, really, we can point other people to Jesus so that they might be saved. Or if they already know him, they might be shown how they should be living too. Because as you live your life, you set an example that they can follow. 1 Timothy 4:12 tells us how we set an example. It gives us 5 ways. We've covered 3 of them so far. It says, don't let anyone think less of you because you are young. Be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way you live, in your love, your faith, and your purity. So today we're going to look at how you can be an example in your faith. Now, when we think of faith, a lot of times we think about what we believe about God, and that's true. But faith is putting that belief in God to the test. When you have faith in God, you trust him. So as people look at your life, does it look like you trust God, that you have faith in him no matter what? If you want people to be pointed to God through your example, then you should have a faith that's so strong that says, you know what, I might not understand what's going on right now. I might be terrified, but I trust God is in control and I trust his plan no matter what. That's what faith really looks like. Here's a cool thing about faith. It gives a chance for your example to be something really cool and really awesome, something that people will notice and remember. But when we need to have faith, that usually is really hard for us too. We see this in the life of Peter, actually, all the disciples. If you really think about the story, in Matthew 14. So they've been sent to the other side of the lake. Jesus isn't with them. He's gone away for some time by himself. And while the disciples are on the lake, it says that this storm comes up. And there's this strong wind and these heavy waves. And the disciples are far away from land and they're terrified. So sometimes in our lives, we're terrified too, right? We might be afraid of what's coming. Maybe we don't understand what's happening right now. Maybe there's just something that happens that God asks us to do and we think, that's impossible. That sounds scary. Maybe telling other people about Jesus is something that you're afraid of. So these moments come when we're not sure what to do. God wants us to have faith, to trust him no matter what. And so the disciples are here in the middle of the lake. There's this storm. It's really scary. It says in verse 25, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on water. That's so cool. Like Jesus is just walking on the water, not swimming through it, not even like floating above it. I guess he could do that, but he's walking on the water. Sometimes when I picture this story, I think of like flat water that Jesus is walking on. But remember, it's a big storm. There's going to be huge waves, like Jesus walking on the water. It's like, that's not a straight path to the disciples. It's like so crazy, so insane to think about. It says in verse 26, when the disciples saw him walking on water, they were terrified. They were so afraid. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!" They thought Jesus was a ghost because he was walking on water in the middle of the night. They're terrified in this storm, and they think that they're all alone. In verse 27, it says, "But Jesus spoke to them at once. 'Don't be afraid,' he said. 'Take courage, I am here.'" I love this because it reminds me that God is all present, right? We learned this from the story of Jonah, that there's nowhere that God is not. He's everywhere. And Jesus reminds them, like, you don't have to be afraid. Take courage. I'm here. I'm here with you. You can remember that for yourself, that God really says those words to us. Don't be afraid. I'm here. You're not alone. Well, here's what happens. In verse 28, Peter calls out to him and he says, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." It's not enough for Peter just to see Jesus doing it. He wants to be where Jesus is, even if that means he has to do something impossible, something scary, something that he cannot do on his own. So he says, "Okay, Jesus, if it's you, call me out to walk on the water." And so Jesus says in verse 29, "Yes, come." So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. What a crazy, amazing moment in Peter's life. Peter has so much faith in Jesus that he believes it's possible for him to walk on water too, because God can do anything. And so he does something so scary. He climbs out of the boat. Now, if it wasn't Jesus, if God couldn't do what he says he could do, Peter would have just sunk right there. We know Peter does walk on the water. What an amazing moment for Peter and for everyone else watching. It's not until Peter looks away and starts to doubt, when he loses faith or trust in God, that's when Peter starts to sink. And so this is a good reminder for us that we need to trust God no matter what. If we really trust him, when an impossible moment comes up, something that should be scary, we remember that promise. God's with me. I'm not doing this alone. And if God wants me to do it, he's going to make the way. And so we take the scary step and we get out of the boat, even though we might get wet, because we trust God no matter what. Jesus says to Peter, after he reaches out his hand and rescues him, because Peter's thinking, he says, "You have so little faith. Why did you doubt me?" A lot of the time when we're afraid, when we don't have faith, it's because we're doubting God. We're doubting that God's in control, or that God cares about us, or that he loves us, or that he has a plan that we can trust, or that he wants to use us. Don't doubt God. Go back to the Bible, read his promises, and remember that they're true. And when he asks you to do something, or life around you just seems out of control, crazy, or scary, whatever it is, remember that you can trust God no matter what. And then let people see that. Your example of faith, of you trusting God when it doesn't make sense, is going to make people ask you, how can you do that? Why aren't you afraid? Why aren't you worried? How do you have peace right now? And you can say, it's because of God. Because I know he's got it. God is in control. He's bigger than all of this. He's all present. He's all powerful. He's all knowing. And so I can trust him no matter what. Be an example in your faith. Even if you might get wet, even if it might be scary, trust God no matter what, because in that example, others might be saved. How cool is that? Remember, God's plan for you is bigger than just you. He wants you to follow his plan in such a way that others might see it and be saved, or others that are saved will see it and they'll learn how they can follow God too, because of your example. And so God can use you as an example through your faith. Trust God no matter what, so that when people see how you live your life with that faith, with that trust, they'll learn that they can trust God too. I'll see you tomorrow, friends.